What's going on, guys? My name is Connor and welcome back to the Boiler Room. So, in other news, we have Uber's IPO coming up, and aren't you guys all excited? I thought you'd be excited to invest in Uber, considering last year alone they lost $1.8 billion. And in 2017, they lost more billions. And in 2016, they lost more billions. And they probably were losing money before 2016, 17, and 18. So doesn't it sound like a great company to invest in? Probably not. So I must say before we continue in this video that I am not a financial advisor. I am in no way, shape, or form licensed to give financial advice. Everything in this video is my personal opinion, and everything I say and or do is only for your entertainment purposes only. So let's go ahead and get started. Uber is going to become a publicly traded company, so what they're going to go through is what's called an IPO. An IPO stands for Initial Public Offering. What this basically means is that you and I can start investing in Uber because now it's a publicly traded company. It went from private to public, and that's all an IPO is. And a fun fact for you, I went back and did some research. Over the last 100 stocks that have become publicly traded, 57 out of the last 100 are now trading below their initial public offering price, while only 43 of them are trading above their initial public offering price. So if you were to go and use this as a strategy, or just to buy every single new company that comes on the market, in theory, you would lose 53% of the time. So that's not a good strategy going forward, and you probably shouldn't do that. It's not a good idea. But if you wanted to, I guess you could. So another thing for you is that Lyft is another ride-sharing company that recently went public. And as we all know, that didn't go so well, as you guys can see. Their stock price has been crushed recently, and it really didn't do so well. So it's not to say that Uber is going to follow the same fate, but there's a pretty good chance considering that in Uber's S1 filing, an S1 filing is what all private companies must file with the SEC. The SEC is a Securities and Exchange Commission. You could basically call them the police or the governing body of the financial markets to make sure nobody's doing anything super shady, even though that happens all the time. All the time. But in other news, the S1 form that Uber did file clearly shows that the company may never turn profitable. So if I asked you to invest all your money into me and I told you, hey guys, by the way, I don't actually think that I'll ever become a profitable company. I lost 1.8 billion last year. I lost another billion in 2017 and 2016. The likelihood of you guys giving me your money is probably not going to happen. So why would you want to do that with Uber? Evidence is pretty clear. Why would you want to invest or put your money into a company that can't turn a profit and that blatantly comes out and tells you we may never actually be profitable? Now, another thing you guys need to take into consideration is that Uber is the biggest ride-sharing company out there, but just because they're the biggest ride-sharing company doesn't necessarily mean they're going to succeed. I mean, I use Uber all the time. Most of the time it's on the weekend, right around 2 in the morning as I'm leaving the bar. Yeah, but that's time for another story. But yes, I use Uber all the time. So from a consumer standpoint, it's great. But as a business model and how they're doing and succeeding, it doesn't look that great. Now, another problem that Uber faces is their drivers. See, their drivers are their main business. Without the drivers, Uber doesn't actually have a business. So that's one of the big problems that Uber faces going forward, is that really their drivers are treated poorly. And this is nothing new. It's been in the news all the time how the drivers are complaining about fares being cut or their wages being cut or Uber's taking too much or Uber continues to rise the amount of commission they're taking off of each ride. And I mean, it's really not surprising that that's happening, but it kind of just is what it is. Now, another big problem along the lines of the drivers is that the drivers aren't actually employees of Uber. They're 1099 contractors, which means that Uber doesn't have to pay their taxes and Uber doesn't really have to offer them any benefits if they work more than 40 hours a week. So in Uber's defense, it's awesome because they get to skip out on paying a bunch of taxes and then they don't have to offer benefits if the drivers work more than 40 hours. So in Uber's defense, it's freaking great and it is awesome for Uber, but for some of the drivers, it's really seen as a negative, and that's a big problem because Uber constantly, every single day, is losing tons of drivers because they feel they're being treated unfairly or poorly, and the consistency that Uber continues to rise or take more money out of the drivers' pockets doesn't feel really good. I mean, if someone told me they were going to start taking more of my money, I would be pissed. Oh, sounds like the federal government. That's for another video. But in other news, the big problem with the drivers is the fact that they're being treated unfairly, and if you don't have drivers for Uber, you don't have a business model. And that is one of the big problems that Uber faces going forward. Another thing to mention is that Uber is working towards autonomous driving cars, and that would fix the whole problem with the drivers, but we all know how autonomous driving has been going so far. Tesla. Checking Tesla 1-2 exactly. We all know that the autonomous driving vehicles aren't quite up to speed or where they need to be in order to drive on the roads, as we've seen them in many car crashes, and they've injured plenty of civilians, and it's just not good. It's just not where it needs to be. So there's plenty of problems that Uber faces going forward. Another problem Uber is constantly fighting is legislation in different laws. There's a big argument and tons of controversy that Uber's been going back and forth with, and that is through the old traditional taxi business. See, taxi companies or taxi drivers had to get licensed in order to drive a taxi, and sometimes those licenses would cost upwards of $1 million. So imagine how you would feel if you were the traditional taxi driver that paid $1 million to get his taxi license and start driving around, and then this company like Uber pops up, and then all these drivers start making money and stealing your customers without having to pay $1 million. I mean, I would be pretty pissed off too. I'd be so pissed off that I want to go ahead and fight Uber, and that's what Uber's been facing for a long time now, and yet they're constantly going back and forth in this battle. So Uber going forward has a ton of problems. For one, they're not profitable. For two, they need drivers, which they're constantly losing. Another thing is the fact that they're just doing poorly. So going forward, Uber has quite an uphill battle. Though they are a disruptive company, though they do provide a great service to the consumers, they still face the problem of not being profitable. They're constantly in the news, and the fact that they don't have an autonomous driving system does not help the fact. And considering that there's other competitors out there like Tesla and Ford and many of the big motor companies are trying to get into the autonomous vehicle systems, well, it's a very competitive market to begin with. And not to mention, we've seen how Lyft performed on its IPO date. So as a well-informed investor and trader, I myself not going to be investing in Uber's IPO. In fact, I will be watching Uber's IPO, and if Uber's IPO starts to go down, the first thing I'm going to be doing is shorting the stock. Now, I probably won't be able to short shares of the company, but I'm going to hope that soon thereafter the IPO, there's going to be options available on the stock, and the first thing I'll probably do is I'm probably going to get puts and try and ride that sucker down. So let's hope everything goes as planned and Uber tanks. Hope you guys liked the video. I hope you learned something new today. And if you can, like, share, and subscribe to the video. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on the next video we release, because they're always good content. There's always something you can learn from the channel. With that being said, thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.